Business is really hard enough as it is. And as you start growing in business, you can't grow without the assistance of excellent people. And without sort of understanding the dependence you have on them, you could be very well teetering on the knife's edge.
Welcome to the Business Behind Your Business, conversations to help your business grow and thrive. Hi, I'm Paul Sweeney, founder of Pretium Solutions, chartered accountants and certified business advisors, hosting the Business Behind Your Business. Okay, so welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business. And look, in our last episode, we were talking to Jason Smith about creating a saleable business and a business that doesn't depend on you as the primary person, the key person in the business. One of the things that we did mention in that interview was that not every business is at that stage where they do have independence from the owner, where they don't have a reliance on a single person. So what happens when things go wrong and you are the sole decision maker in the business, that everything depends on you? And that's something we want to unpack today about what strategies you can employ. And we've got Jim Mills from Merit Wealth back with us today. So welcome back, Jim.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have Jim back. And Jim, so your role at Merit Wealth is you're an advisor, not just looking at wealth creation, but wealth protection and also risk reduction as well. If you want to just explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of building the structure or the foundation of any structure for any kind of wealth creation is actually making sure that it's protected. And so too, especially that relates back to business, so without having a base of protection, and that relates back to your own asset protection, but also the business operations in terms of revenue, in terms of stability of cash flow and an uncertainty of ownership. All comes down to understanding that there's a base level of protection required. So it really does form the foundation of most financial advice, is to ensure that there's a level of protection around the assets themselves and the mechanisms of the cash flow and the revenue associated with that.
Mm-hmm. So from a business point of view, there is a big risk. And for a lot of people, their primary source of income is their business, and their primary source of retirement income is going to be their proceeds from selling the business. So How do we reduce the risk in business? What's the strategy, or is there a particular tool that we use in doing so?
Yeah, sure. I think what's important is when there's different stages of business, and that's probably where it comes down to. So if you were to look at your business right now and look for stress points in terms of critical staff, what would happen if that person didn't turn up tomorrow? In terms of business partnership, what if the 50% of the business that is owned by your business partner all of a sudden was inherited by their spouse? And is that person the person that you actually decided to go into business with in the first place? What are the stress points of potential sort of disaster recovery that's required? If one of your key people didn't come into work tomorrow, would the bank look to recall the loans that perhaps have been secured by that person? So I think it starts with a piece of paper, maybe a glass of red, and just go through and start testing weak points of within your business that really depend on key people and the maintenance of what they represent to the business. Are they the rainmakers? Are they the people that are making sure operations run smoothly? What impact will it have on the business if they're not there tomorrow? So in the terms of a key person, there's generally two types of instances that we look at. There's a key person revenue component, and there's a key person capital component. So revenue really is, you might be talking about key sales staff. So you might even have bank lending associated against how successful your business is, and you might be needing to show your revenue slate to the bank every month on month. So if that person doesn't turn up tomorrow, and it might take you 6 months to replace that person, where's the cash injection going to come to stabilise the business that was part of the planning in the first place to give birth and give stability to the business? So it really comes down to testing the weak points and understanding the dependence that you've got on key people.
Yeah, so I think traditionally a lot of people view key person or key risk insurance solely from the point of view from the business owner, and they ignore the roles that other people in their business can play. And I've worked with clients where a software development company, and the key programmer or to running the project. Look, if the business was to lose them, then the project would have fallen apart completely. So that was a big risk there. So ensuring if anything were to happen to that person, that was critical to that business. So so I think we need to look beyond that key person. So having a sit down and just say what could go wrong. And which leads to another question, because when I ask that question of people, usually the response is, no, it's not going to happen to me. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the worst is, we're an interesting race because we always deny the worst will occur, but it's the one thing that interests us the most in terms of media and sort of shock kind of interest value. Unfortunately, in the real world, we know bad things do occur, and that doesn't always sort of apply to the sort of fairy tale image. Business is really hard enough as it is, and as you start growing in business, you can't grow without the assistance of excellent people, and without sort of understanding the dependence you have on them. You could be very well teetering on the knife's edge. Let's take an example. So let's say you and I, Paul, are in business. And let's say that I'm the sales guy and you're the operations kind of magician that keeps all the glue together. So in our business planning, we said, okay, we're looking to generate at least $1 million of revenue this year, okay, from this one particular salesperson. And so that goes into our business modeling and our business planning, and we understand our cash flow on the basis of that. A lot of big things hinge on ensuring that we get the right revenue target so that we can continue our cash flow of our operations. So unfortunately, one day I don't look left and I don't look right, and the bus takes me halfway down the street. So the issue you've got now is that there was $1 million of revenue that I was supposed to generate in that business. Now, that's no longer an option. So the immediate question is, and the immediate jump to arms will be, well, we've got to replace Jim. How much is it going to cost to get a recruitment agent in? Let's say I'm on the big bucks, and we know our recruitment agents like to, let's say they're handsomely paid these days, and so, well, they should find a good person. So there's a massive recruitment agent cost. There's the period of time it's going to take you to replace me. You're either going to make knee-jerk decisions and you're going to replace me with the first person that walks through the door, or you're going to take your time and make sure it's the right person. So let's assume that, worst case, it might take 6 months to replace, Jim Mills. So so let's say it takes 6 months. So there's $500,000 worth of revenue the business is potentially about to drop, and there might be even another $50,000 worth of recruitment costs. When you bring that new person in, there could be another $100,000 worth of training you're going to have to give this person, right? So what your business needs in this instance, in this example, is a good injection of $650,000 to stabilize it so that you can go along and make the right decisions at the right time, get the right person, give them the right training, use the right recruitment agent resources to get the right person in. And you don't have to sweat it because you, with some certainty, know that within 6 months you've got Jim replaced, and the cash flow of the business continues. Everyone's sad, but the business continues and is as viable as it was before the event. So that's an example of key person revenue. And, the products that you use for the funding mechanism there are death, a death insurance policy, a total permanent disability, total and permanent disability policy. You can also use trauma policies. So trauma insurance policies traditionally are diagnosis of up to nearly 50 different things like heart attack, cancer, stroke, etc. But in the event I have a neurological breakdown or potentially something occurs where I'm no longer viable in the business, you can structure agreements for key person revenue policies in that event also. So in that space, the funding mechanism has sort of saved the viability of the cash flow, and business continues as normal. So that's an example of a key person revenue. Key person revenue insurance premiums paid for by the business are taxable when they're received by the business, and so too the premiums are deductible by the business. So That's a key determinant there. The other side of it is maybe in our business, we'd each fronted up $1 million, and in the event that I'm no longer around, the bank might say, and maybe I've got that against borrowed stock or whatever the case is. In that event, I'm halfway down the street again, and there's a debt in the business that I was responsible for. So key person capital is an example of using those same insurance policies to clear the debt that I was responsible for. So maybe if there's $1 million there, you need a key man policy capital on me for $1 million. So there's just a couple of examples of it's a funding mechanism just to maintain stability. It then comes down to, you've got to look at the age of the people that you're looking to insure, thinking about the affordability of the premium, the health of these people. Am I insurable at all? What if I'm the rainmaker in the business and I'm 80 years old and there's plenty of them out there, but simply aren't insurable anymore because of their age? So there's more to funding mechanisms than insurance policies, but it's ensuring you've got a plan. Ensuring if insurance isn't the funding mechanism, ensuring that you've got a friendly vendor finance option that's still going to like your business when that person's gone.
So we need to look more than just the insurance side when we're coming up with our risk strategy. And we've talked with Dave Ferris about the business risk, so the general types of insurance, of property insurance or risk, public liability. But there's this internal risk of what happens to key people, and that's something that a lot of people don't consider. And I think there's a need for it. So,
it's a heart attack when anyone leaves your business. Sorry?
Yeah. How do we go about deciding how much or what we actually need to insure? Like, what's the best way to do that?
I think you've got to look at, you've got to be able to, I guess you need to have a smart business where you've actually broken down processes and understand the value of each of those processes and how much it actually costs you. So when you're walking through what the cost of running your business actually represents, there's the operational cost. Often that gets soaked up in a whole heap of different processes, and unless you've spent the time to break it down to understand what the value of each of those processes are in the overall sort of sales or revenue conversion process, you won't really have an understanding of the impact. So there is a lot of smart work to be done that's valuable beyond this type of planning, but knowing what each process and the value of it is, I think, is pretty critical from an operational perspective. So I was saying you have a heart attack when any good person leaves your business. So, and we're going through this right now. So we've got an excellent staff member, I would class as an excellent component of the business, who's responsible for some really key processes, not in the sales side of things, but on the operational. So I have to consider, so what is the value of all of those different processes that are critical in the overall operations? How long will it take me to replace that person? And what sort of level of training and how much will that training cost? And, what will the recruitment cost be? And if that's a huge amount of money that my business can't afford to weather, until that occurs, then I should be thinking about perhaps insuring that person for key person, because it's not just a matter of leaving. It's a matter of the uncertainty of whether or not we all get to see the next sunrise, which hopefully we all do. But in terms of insurance triggering, it of course is death, total permanent disability, and a vast array of different nasty diagnoses that can be covered under a trauma or critical illness policy. So I think, it really does start from the base down. Understand your operational value. That's critical. It also helps you ensuring that you're charging appropriately, because as you know, in any business, there's revenue and cash flow coming through the door, but there's a whole lot of operational work that takes place for that to even occur. And if that doesn't occur, there's no revenue to flow. So the value of understanding each component of your practice and then identifying these key people to say, geez, you know what, I've got such a high dependence on this person. How am I going to mitigate that risk? It could be by employing others and cross-training, or if it's an abrupt and unexpected issue, then, you're talking about a funding mechanism like a key person. And the fact is, the majority of businesses that shut down are abrupt. There's a catastrophic event that's occurred, and there just hasn't been enough planning or funding required or available to keep it afloat.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to a wider planning process that business owners need to undertake is actually looking at how effective their systems and processes are, how
Yeah.
effective the knowledge transfer is. Like, is
Mm.
there one person in the business that knows everything, but that the next person knows nothing, and they're always asking the
Yeah.
person that knows everything? So you've got this huge dependence. So looking at, you can reduce, I think, your the risk to the business by spreading the knowledge base, but also the reliance on different people. So if you've got 5 employees spread across a role, your risk is lower than having one key person. So
Yeah.
having a look at how your business is made up and who's doing what, and how easy it is for somebody new to come in. Like we mentioned, the sales rep, probably 6 months before the revenue came back up. Is there a way that you can design your business processes to make the onboarding process a lot faster, so that people become revenue producers quicker when you do have to hire a new person? Those sorts of things would, I think, reduce the amount that you need to cover for, which of course reduces the cost. But I think you need to have that conversation and discussion. Now, most business owners aren't risk experts and they're not insurance experts. So what's the process? Once you've identified you've got a risk, how do we go about implementing this key person insurance?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there's probably 2 components to it. It's sitting down with a financial advisor. So you should be sitting down with a financial advisor that is proficient in business protection. Okay, and there's a difference between what is understood to be business insurances, which is actually general insurance side of things. Business protection is referring to key person revenue and key person capital cover. It's also referring to business succession funding. Okay, so the process is to sit down with a financial advisor who's proficient in these things, undergo that sort of test, the risk test, sort of identify who the key people are, understand the impact on the business, and then come to a point of understanding what the actual cost of losing that business and for what period of time it would likely be. So in that event, you sit down. It is going through life insurance analysis. It's then putting in applications and going through the underwriting process. Now, there's a lot of hoops to jump through here. One of the common things we look at in my practice is business succession funding. Okay, so you might have a business with 2 or 3 different partners. They might be all different ages and all different states of health. The question becomes, if something happens to one of those partners, how does that shareholding that they own then distribute evenly to the remaining business partners? Because if nothing happens, it's just inherited. Excuse me. It's just inherited, and you find yourself in business with that person's spouse, which may or may not be a wonderful thing. But generally it's not what was planned in the first place. So in the event of using an insurance funding mechanism for death, total permanent disability, and trauma or critical illness cover, we'd be looking at the value of the overall business, so a business valuation, or an agreement from all of the partners as to what the value would likely be if they were happy to walk away, understanding the percentage of shareholding, and then applying that to the value of the business, ensuring that their component was covered under those policies for at least that amount. Now, if that insurance policy is owned by the spouse, so in the event of a trigger event, the spouse would receive those funds, and a buy-sell agreement, a proper buy-sell agreement, would then allow the transfer of those shares to the remaining business owners. So there's the need for a solicitor to be involved. There's a need for the financial advisor to sit down and determine the right levels of cover, and importantly, the right insurer. And I can tell you, a long time ago, we've been running this business now for about 11 years. Now, back then, insurance policies, they weren't vanilla. There were some big differences in disability definitions and certainly some really big differences in trauma definition. Over the years, they've come up to par. But now, the issues that we're facing now in the life insurance industry is complete instability of pricing, and whether or not that insurer is going to be around next year with one buying out the other and whatnot. So there's been huge hikes in insurance premiums, and some insurers are more stable than others. We still have to look at definition and quality of contract, but certainly there is some real instability of insurance premiums out there. And anyone listening to this that's got any type of insurance policy would have experienced this over the last 12 months, and if not, will experience it over the next 6 months, huge hikes in cost. Why is that occurring? Spikes in claims are occurring in critical illness and income protection style policies, and that's driving up prices. But there's a general massive overhaul that we're seeing out there across the industry that just makes some of these policies unstable, another major component. We've got clients that are paying business succession funding premiums of upwards of $100,000, and some are paying up to $10,000, to cover off their different lives. It depends on how old the business partners are and what their existing state of health is. So if you're a business partner with someone that's older than you, that's in a different level of health state than you, it's in the back of your mind what's going to happen one day if this guy or girl has a heart attack. Where does that leave me? What's the options I've got at that point? At that point, it's a bit too late, So it's all part of this stress test of understanding where your financial and cash flow weaknesses are in the event of stuff happening that you don't want to really think about. The good side of it is once it's been put in place, you can forget about it as long as you've got an advisor, as we would, continuously reviewing this stuff. So think about, you needed, say we're back in business again, Paul, and the business is worth $2 million to make my maths really easy. You've got 50%, I've got 50%. So if something happens to you, guess what? Your wife's going to want $1 million. And guess what? I'd really like control of the business, because I went into business with you, not your wife, and she might be really, really capable. But my sort of attraction to going into business with you was because of what you had to offer and our relationships, etc. So in the event of that occurring, your wife's going to get $1 million. Our buy-sell agreement will kick in, and I will get that other 50% of the shareholding. So it's as simple as that. If I was 80 years old and you were the young, lush age you are today, in an excellent state of health that you are, so you're insurable, but I'm not, then we have to think about another component. If I'm about to topple off, how are you going to get the shareholding, and how is my wife going to be satisfied not to come and knock on your door after I'm gone saying, hey, Paul, I know all the dust is settled and everything now, but could I have $1 million, please? So the funding mechanism becomes really, really important, especially when it's unexpected. So that's a major component. Now, I should mention too that in those types of instances, we have come across so many times people that thought they had their buy-sell agreement in place with a piece of paper written down, completely not binding, the wording not binding whatsoever. There was no guarantee, so they're paying for their business succession funding insurance. They think that it's all sorted. In the event of something happening, the spouse will get the sum insured because it's a self-owned policy, but they will not get the shareholding because that letter has not been drafted properly. It is not a proper buy-sell agreement. So it's so critical that the solicitor is involved. When should the solicitor? So this is where now, when do all the pieces line up? How do we go about this? The first step is really sitting down with your financial advisor and getting the right mix of things in place. You need to have the policies in force before you get the solicitor involved, because the solicitor has to name these policies in the buy-sell agreement. They have to specifically refer to them. So the order of things would be sit down with the advisor, understand the impact. It's probably a joint exercise with the accountant, actually, understanding what the financial impact is, talking about business planning and whatnot, getting to a point of understanding, okay, well, this is the gaps that we're currently experiencing. We can fund these with trigger events of death, total permanent disability, critical illness and trauma. And then we have to go through the application process, jump through all the underwriting hoops. Hopefully everybody gets insured. Those that can't get insurance, we have to figure out a vendor finance solution in advance. And then we would get the solicitor involved to bring in the buy-sell agreement. to structure the agreement appropriately so that there is no grey area about what will happen in the event of. So and then, at least that's one major business planning component that you don't have to worry about. But this stuff does happen, and it happens frequently.
Yeah, look, it does happen. I think the ostrich approach doesn't work. You've got to be aware of it, and I think people would probably be put off by the process or the amount of work involved in the process. But I think you've got to go back to that first step, which we talked about earlier on in our conversation, was about identifying, if this event happened, what's the cost and what's the risk to us? What's going to happen? And I think if you have a good understanding of what the risk is and what the value of that risk is, so let's say if it's going to cost you $1 million, then $10,000 is quite a small investment.
Exactly.
To do that. But like if your risk is only $300,000 or $400,000, the amount that you're insuring for is a lot less. So I'm guessing that depending, well, it's hard. There's so many variables in here, but the cost of implementing the strategy would be less. But it is important to get right advice from the right people in the right order, and it reduces the risk. The more you've got control over what's going on, or at least control over the steps in the process, the better equipped you are, and the more you can sleep at night, really, because you don't want to be worrying about these things.
Yeah,
particularly
absolutely.
when there's been a triggering event. So, yeah. So we talked about a lot of really good things today, and we're getting some clarity about the need for a consideration of key man insurance, not just for the business owners, but for the key people in your business. So that might be a salesperson or a programmer or a product developer or whoever that may be. But we've talked about the need to insure, and we've discussed the process, which can be quite involved, and that's why you need to get advice from somebody correctly qualified. So not just a financial advisor that is licensed and experienced in providing business risk insurances is important. So what's the one key thing, if you do nothing else, Jim? What's the one key thing that business owners should get in place to actually, as a first step for their reducing that key person risk?
I think you really need to undergo a stress test in your business. This is going to identify not just opportunities for you to think about, life insurance, which is a grudge purchase and cost for any person, but it's so important, in stabilising things and being able to put those things to bed. But conduct a stress test in your business. If you're not aware of the value of certain processes, and if your business cash flow isn't strong enough or your reserves aren't big enough to weather a significant storm, then you really need to think about a funding mechanism to stabilise your operations, whether it be sales or operations, or whether it be being able to pay out a business owner or their spouse in the event of something terrible happening. With all of those things tied off in terms of planning, you've got a stronger business. It's a much greater viable business, and it's a business that will survive the storm. And if any of us have been in business over the last 12 months, storms come, right? In many forms. Sometimes they're global epidemics, and sometimes it's someone getting hit by a truck. So there's different things that we need to account for. And with a stress-tested business, you know where your weak points are, and you'll be able to identify also the value points that your operations and front office represent that you should be considering in terms of stabilising from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So next steps, Jim, if our listeners want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Okay, well, we've got offices in Dural and in Camden, but obviously in today's world we all operate online and on Zoom, so very happy to have discussions with anyone. Probably best to head to our website, which is www.meritfp.com.au, F for financial, P for planning, Merit FP, or contact our office. You'll get all our contact information there, and we'd be very happy to help you. We've got a great team of very experienced advisors and back office operational staff that are very, very skilled in this particular area.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Jim. And we'll put those contact details in the show notes so that everybody can access them. And look, the other way to contact any of our presenters is to go to the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website, where you can find the profiles of all of our presenters and links to some of the resources mentioned in our interviews. And also a way that you can subscribe to future episodes so you don't miss out on some of the great advice that we're hearing, just like we've heard from Jim today. So thank you, Jim, again for coming on and talking to us about a very important aspect that all business owners should consider.
Absolute pleasure, Paul. Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Do you have a question you'd like our team of experts to answer? If you do, send your question to podcast@thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. To hear more from The Business Behind Your Business, don't forget to subscribe using your favourite podcast player. Or you can visit the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website.